Map. I inherited 1,100 acres and discovered an entire HOA stealing my land and water. They tried burying the evidence until one hidden valve exposed everything and brought their empire down. Welcome back, everyone. Before today's story begins, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll always know when a new story is released. Your support means more than you know. Every like, comment, and subscription helps this channel grow and allows us to keep sharing incredible stories with viewers around the world. And before we begin, tell me this, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Now, grab a comfortable seat, relax, and let's dive into today's unforgettable story. By noon, there won't be anything left here with your family's name on it. Cynthia Bellamy said it like she was announcing the weather. Behind her, a concrete mixer growled in the cold Arkansas dawn, its rotating drum grinding stone and water into a thick gray slurry. The vibration traveled through the ground and up the soles of my boots. Diesel smoke mixed with the smell of wet clay, crushed limestone, and cedar sap. It was 6:08 a.m. A construction crew stood around a rectangular excavation beside the Silver Pines clubhouse. At the bottom of the pit were the broken foundations of my uncle's stone workshop. I had seen that building every summer of my childhood. Arthur Caldwell taught me how to sharpen fence tools there, how to repair a pump seal, how to listen for pressure changes inside old water lines. The walls had been built from field stone gathered by my grandfather in 1951. Now those stones sat in a muddy pile beside a decorative fountain base. Cynthia stood between me and the excavation wearing a camel-colored coat, polished black boots, and pearl earrings that caught the flashing amber lights of the mixer truck. Her blonde hair had not moved despite the wind. In one hand, she held a trespass notice. In the other, she held her phone. "You need to leave before security removes you," she said. "My name is Grant Caldwell. I know who you claim to be. I inherited this land." She gave me a small, patient smile, the kind people use when speaking to someone they have already decided is confused. "You inherited acreage west of Silver Pines," she said. "This property belongs to the association." I looked beyond her. 71 homes curved around a man-made lake, their porch lights glowing through the morning fog. Sprinklers clicked across perfect lawns. A stone entrance marked Silver Pines Estates rose beside the road where my family's cattle gate used to stand. The probate deed inside my jacket said I owned 1,100 acres. The county map Cynthia had emailed me claimed Silver Pines sat outside them. Only one of those things could be true. A foreman in an orange vest approached the mixer and signaled the driver. The hydraulic chute began unfolding toward the pit. Metal squealed. Concrete sloshed inside the drum. I stepped closer to the edge. Cynthia moved in front of me. "Do not interfere with an approved community improvement." The first light of sunrise reached into the excavation. That was when I saw it. A black iron pipe, nearly 8 inches wide, ran beneath the shattered workshop floor. Most of it was coated in rust, but one exposed section carried raised letters beneath a layer of mud. I crouched and wiped the metal with my glove. Cynthia's expression changed. Only slightly, but I saw it. The lettering appeared one character at a time. C.W.C. 1951. Caldwell Water Cooperative. I remembered Uncle Arthur kneeling beside an old valve house on the northern ridge, his hands smelling of grease and mineral water. "Everything downstream depends on what happens up here," he had told me. At 12, I thought he meant irrigation. Now I looked past the pipe toward the artificial lake, the clubhouse, and the rows of expensive houses surrounding it. A low mechanical hum came from beneath the ground, water moving under pressure. The same pipe feeding my uncle's workshop appeared to continue directly beneath Silver Pines. Cynthia recovered her smile. "That is abandoned infrastructure," she said. "Then why is water still moving through it?" The foreman looked at her. The concrete chute hovered over the pit. For 3 seconds, nobody spoke. Then Cynthia raised her hand. "Pour it." The mixer roared louder. Gray concrete surged down the chute toward the pipe. I pulled the brass key from my pocket, the one Arthur had left beside a note containing 6 words. "Find the ridge valve before they bury it." Cynthia thought she was covering an old foundation. What she did not know was that the pipe beneath her feet supplied every faucet, fountain, and swimming pool in Silver Pines. And she had just ordered 20 tons of evidence poured over it. The concrete hit the pipe with a heavy, wet slap. Gray slurry spread across the rusted iron, swallowing the raised letters 1 inch at a time. Cynthia watched without blinking. I watched too, forcing myself not to step forward. Stopping the pour would only give her a reason to call me dangerous. So I memorized everything. The truck number, the foreman's name, the time on my phone, the exact section of pipe disappearing beneath the concrete. Then I stepped back. To understand why that pipe mattered, you need to understand Arthur Caldwell. He was my mother's older brother, a broad-shouldered man with white hair, cracked hands, and the permanent smell of machine oil in his clothes. He never married, never had children, never trusted developers who arrived wearing clean boots. Arthur owned 1,100 acres of forest, pasture, limestone ridge, and spring-fed valleys in northern Arkansas. He called it the Caldwell Tract. Everyone else called it land waiting to be sold. When I was 10, my parents started sending me there every summer. Arthur believed children should know how water moved, how fences failed, and how to repair something before paying someone else to replace it. Most mornings began before sunrise. I would follow him across wet grass, carrying a toolbox that felt twice my weight. Cicadas screamed from the trees. Mineral water hissed through old iron lines beneath the soil. Arthur could locate a leak by sound alone. He would press one ear against a valve housing, close his eyes, and listen. Pressure tells the truth, he used to say. People usually don't. The system had been built in 1951 by my grandfather and several neighboring farmers. Caldwell Water Cooperative was never a public utility. It was a private network of springs, gravity tanks, buried pipes, and control valves designed to supply livestock, workshops, and a handful of rural homes. Arthur maintained it for nearly 50 years. The ridge valve was the heart of it. I had seen it once when I was 12. A round iron wheel inside a stone chamber near the northern ridge. Arthur let me turn it half an inch while he watched the pressure gauge. The pipes groaned beneath our boots. Somewhere far downhill, water changed direction. Everything downstream depends on what happens up here, he said. I thought he was teaching me plumbing. I understand now that he was teaching me power. Arthur suffered a stroke 7 years before he died. His right side weakened, and the county placed him in a rehabilitation facility outside Harrison. I visited whenever work brought me close. The last time I saw him, he could barely lift his coffee cup. But when I mentioned a new subdivision near his eastern ridge, his fingers tightened around my wrist. They found the water, he whispered. I asked who. He looked toward the door, then back at me. Don't let them bury the valve. Those were the clearest words he spoke that day. 3 months later, he was gone. The probate attorney called while I was inspecting storm damage at a poultry farm near Fayetteville. Rain hammered the metal roof so loudly I had to press the phone against my ear. Arthur had named me his sole heir. 1,100 acres. A week later, a cedar box arrived by certified delivery. Inside were tax receipts, an old parcel map, a brass key, and a folded note written in Arthur's unsteady hand. The ridge was never conveyed. Find the ridge valve before they bury it. The key carried no number, only a small symbol shaped like a valve wheel. At the time, I assumed the message referred to an abandoned pump station. Then I drove to the property and found Silver Pines estates covering the eastern ridge. 71 homes, a private lake, a clubhouse, and water bills issued by a company I had never heard of. Back at the excavation, concrete finally covered the last visible section of pipe. Cynthia turned toward me. There, she said. Problem solved. But beneath the concrete, I could still hear the faint hum of moving water. Arthur had not left me 1,100 acres. He had left me the system keeping Silver Pines alive. And Cynthia had just shown me exactly what she was desperate to hide. Silver Pines did not bill its residents for water through the county. That was the first thing I learned when I started digging. Every monthly statement came from a private company called Bellamy Utility Management. The name appeared in small gray letters beneath the HOA logo, easy to overlook unless you were searching for it. I was. The company charged each home a base service fee, a maintenance surcharge, and something called watershed preservation. 71 homes, a clubhouse, a pool, an artificial lake, all paying Cynthia Bellamy's company for water flowing through Caldwell pipes. The realization sat cold in my stomach. The next afternoon, Cynthia invited me to her office above the clubhouse. Invited was her word. The security guard at the entrance checked my license twice and followed me upstairs. Her office overlooked the lake. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed paddle boats, stone walking paths, and rows of homes reflected in water that had once fed Arthur's cattle fields. The room smelled like lemon polish and expensive perfume. Cynthia sat behind a walnut desk with 3 folders arranged in front of her. "You've caused enough disruption," she said. "I'm giving you one opportunity to resolve this privately." She opened the first folder. Inside was a county parcel map showing the Caldwell property ending west of Silver Pines. The second contained a warranty deed bearing Arthur's name. The third held utility permits, engineering approvals, and a service agreement granting Bellamy Utility Management exclusive control over Silver Pines' water system. The paperwork looked polished, official, almost too clean. I examined the deed first. Arthur Caldwell's name was typed as Arthur James Caldwell. Missing the second D, Cynthia noticed where my eyes stopped. Minor clerical errors do not invalidate recorded instruments. I said nothing. The signature bothered me more. Arthur's handwriting had trembled for years before his stroke. Even his birthday cards looked as if the letters were balancing on loose gravel. This signature was smooth, wide, confident. The date beneath it was 8 months after he entered rehabilitation. I turned to the utility agreement. It claimed Bellamy Utility Management owned all pipelines, valves, wells, and reservoirs serving the community. "Where is the source located?" I asked. Cynthia folded her hands. "Silver Pines maintains multiple independent water assets." That wasn't my question. Her jaw tightened. I pointed through the window toward the lake. "What fills that?" "Spring collection and approved groundwater infrastructure." "Which springs?" She closed the folder. "You are not a utility engineer." "No, but I grew up maintaining that system." The security guard shifted near the door. Cynthia leaned back and studied me. For the first time, she stopped treating me like a confused heir. She treated me like a problem. Then she slid a settlement agreement across the desk. $90,000. In exchange, I would release all claims involving Silver Pines, Bellamy Utility Management, the Eastern Ridge, and any underground infrastructure crossing the development. The language was broad enough to bury a pipeline. Or 71 of them. "You sign this," she said, and everyone moves forward. I looked at the number, then at the utility clause, then at the lake beyond her windows. "If your company owns the water system," I asked, "why are you paying me to surrender claims to it?" Cynthia's smile returned, but her eyes stayed flat. "This is not payment. It is courtesy." I stood. As I turned toward the door, something outside caught the light. A maintenance worker had lifted a round iron cover near the clubhouse lawn. Beneath it was a valve housing painted blue. Even from the second floor, I could see raised letters on the rim. CWC, Caldwell Water Cooperative. The worker looked up. Cynthia followed my gaze. Her hand moved quickly toward a remote on the desk, lowering the window blinds. The room darkened one panel at a time. "Your uncle abandoned that system decades ago," she said. I looked at the closed blinds. "Then stop billing people for using it." The security guard opened the door. Cynthia did not threaten me as I left. She did something more revealing. She picked up her phone and called someone before I reached the stairs. That evening, Silver Pines residents received an emergency alert. It claimed an outside party was attempting to interfere with the community water supply. My name appeared in the first sentence. Cynthia was no longer hiding the system. She was preparing 71 families to defend it for her. By 6 that evening, every resident in Silver Pines knew my name. Cynthia's emergency alert had spread faster than the storm clouds gathering over the ridge. Grant Caldwell may attempt to disrupt community water service. The message did not mention that I had never touched a valve. It did not mention the settlement offer. It did not mention that Bellamy Utility Management had been charging families for water flowing through pipes stamped with my family's name. By 7:40 people were waiting outside Arthur's farmhouse. Headlights cut across the pasture. Car doors slammed. Voices carried through the wet air. I stepped onto the porch. A man in a red work jacket stood at the front of the crowd with his arms folded. "My daughter has a medical condition," he said. "You shut off our water, and you put her at risk." "I'm not shutting off anything." "That's not what the HOA said." A woman beside him raised her phone and started recording. "Are you trying to take our homes too?" The accusation landed harder than I expected. I looked past them toward the glowing windows of Silver Pines. Cynthia had done something clever. She had taken my claim against her and turned it into a threat against them. I inherited the land, I said. I'm trying to find out why your utility company is using infrastructure my family built. The crowd answered with angry voices. Most of them were not cruel. They were scared. Mortgage payments. Children. Elderly parents. Water running from their kitchen taps. Cynthia had tied all of it to me. Then she drove up. Her black SUV stopped beside the pasture fence. She stepped out beneath a clear umbrella while a security vehicle idled behind her. Everyone, please remain calm, she called. The crowd quieted immediately. Cynthia walked toward the porch with a folder pressed against her coat. Mr. Caldwell has refused a reasonable settlement, she said. Until this matter is resolved, residents should document any suspicious activity near utility equipment. I stared at her. You told them I planned to cut their water. You threatened to interfere with a private system. I asked who owned it. Her expression never changed. That distinction may matter to you. It does not matter to families who could wake up with dry faucets. She was using fear like a fence. And it was working. The next morning, I found the stone workshop sealed with a steel chain. A red notice had been fastened to the door. Unsafe structure. Access prohibited. Cynthia's signature appeared at the bottom. By noon, the old county utility maps had vanished from the public records portal. Evelyn Brooks, a clerk in the land office, called me from a private number. Someone requested an administrative withdrawal, she whispered. They claimed the files contained obsolete infrastructure data. Who requested it? She paused. Bellamy Utility Management. An hour later, a concrete crew returned to the eastern ridge. They were scheduled to cover the remaining section of exposed pipe 3 days earlier than planned. Cynthia was accelerating everything. She wanted the workshop sealed, the maps removed, and the pipeline buried before I understood what connected them. That evening, a gray pickup followed me from the courthouse to a gas station outside town. The driver parked 2 pumps away. Martin Hale stepped out. He was in his late 60s, thin, nervous, wearing a Silver Pines maintenance jacket. He pretended to check his tire pressure while speaking without looking at me. The HOA doesn't own the water company, he said. Cynthia does. I know. No, you don't know all of it. He slipped a folded billing statement through my open truck window. At the top was Bellamy Utility Management. At the bottom was a transfer authorization sending monthly utility revenue into a private holding account. Cynthia's name appeared beside the signature line. Martin glanced toward the road. They've been paying her company for 9 years, he said. And every time the lake drops, she sends maintenance crews to the northern ridge. The ridge valve. His face tightened. That's what Arthur called it. Before I could ask more, headlights turned into the station. Martin stepped away. They're pouring concrete before sunrise, he whispered. Whatever you're looking for, find it tonight. Then he drove off. I looked down at Arthur's brass key resting beside the billing statement. For the first time, I understood Cynthia's deadline. She was not trying to protect the residents from me. She was trying to bury the only thing that could prove she had been selling them my water. The emergency hearing began at 10:15 the next morning. Rain hammered the courthouse windows while Cynthia sat at the opposite table in a charcoal suit, looking rested enough to make me hate her. Her attorney placed 3 binders beside him. Hannah Prescott placed 1 folder beside me. Inside it were the utility statements Martin had given us, corporate registration records, and bank transfers showing Bellamy Utility Management sending quarterly payments to Cynthia's private holding company. The evidence was clean, direct, ugly. Hannah stood first. Silver Pines residents have paid more than $600,000 in utility fees to a company controlled by the HOA president, she said. That company is using infrastructure marked Caldwell Water Cooperative while attempting to destroy or conceal the remaining physical evidence. Cynthia's attorney rose slowly. Ownership of a company is not ownership of a pipeline. He was right. I hated that more. Hannah showed the judge photographs of the iron pipe beneath Arthur's workshop, the C.W.C. markings, the concrete pour, and the valve housing outside the clubhouse. She presented Arthur's probate documents and the old parcel map. Then she requested an emergency order stopping all construction on the eastern ridge. The judge studied the photographs for several minutes. What evidence establishes the precise location of the water system relative to Mr. Caldwell's property? Hannah's silence lasted less than 2 seconds. It felt longer. The original utility maps were removed from the county portal yesterday. Do you have a certified survey? Not yet. A recorded utility easement. We are still locating it. An engineering inspection confirming that this pipe supplies Silver Pines? Not yet. Each answer tightened something behind my ribs. Cynthia's attorney did not need to prove she owned the system. He only needed to show that I had not yet proved she didn't. He described the construction as routine safety work. He called the workshop unstable. He called the visible pipe abandoned. He called my concerns speculation from an heir who had arrived after years of lawful community operation. Then Cynthia took the stand. She spoke softly about children, elderly residents, and the danger of disrupting water service. She never mentioned the $90,000 settlement. She never mentioned her private holding account. When Hannah asked whether she financially benefited from Bellamy Utility Management, Cynthia admitted it. Administrative compensation, she said. The judge's expression hardened. But not enough. He ordered Cynthia to preserve all financial and utility records. He prohibited anyone from intentionally shutting off water service. Then he denied our request to stop construction. We have evidence of a potential conflict of interest, he said. We do not yet have sufficient proof that the disputed infrastructure belongs to the Caldwell estate. The gavel came down. Cynthia had won again. Outside, Silver Pines residents waited beneath umbrellas. Cynthia stepped onto the courthouse stairs and told them the court had rejected my attempt to seize their water system. Several people applauded. She looked directly at me as cameras recorded her. This community is protected, she said. That night, the workshop flooded. I received the call from a county deputy at 11:38. Water was pouring beneath the chain door and running across the gravel in dark streams. Inside, shelves had collapsed. Old paper records floated through muddy water. Ink bled from ledgers in blue-black clouds. A maintenance worker claimed an ancient pipe had ruptured. The break was clean. Too clean. Someone had cut it. I spent 2 hours carrying soaked boxes into the yard while rain soaked through my coat. Every document I lifted seemed to dissolve between my fingers. Cynthia had preserved the records exactly as ordered. She had simply destroyed them first. Near 2 a.m., I moved a fallen cabinet and noticed one floor stone sitting lower than the others. A brass circle showed beneath the mud. Not a pipe fitting. A lock. I scraped away the dirt and saw the same valve wheel symbol engraved into its face. My hand stopped shaking. I pulled Arthur's key from my pocket. It slid into the lock without resistance. Then I turned it. Something heavy released beneath the workshop floor. The floor shifted with a deep stone scrape. Cold air breathed up through the gap. I wedged my fingers beneath the loosened slab and pulled until the muscles in my shoulders burned. The stone lifted just enough to reveal a narrow iron staircase descending beneath Arthur's workshop. Rainwater dripped from my coat as I aimed my flashlight into the darkness. The beam caught concrete walls, copper gauges, and a rusted handrail. I climbed down. The chamber smelled like wet limestone, mineral deposits, and old machine grease. A row of pressure gauges lined one wall, their glass faces clouded but intact. Iron pipes disappeared through the foundation in 4 directions. At the center stood a waist-high metal cabinet. The brass key opened that too. Inside were rolled engineering maps sealed in waxed canvas, maintenance journals, recorded water agreements, and a leather ledger marked Caldwell Water Cooperative, 1951. Arthur had hidden the history of the entire system beneath the building Cynthia tried to erase. I carried everything upstairs and spread it across 2 work tables while Hannah drove from Little Rock. By dawn, we had the first answer. The original pipeline map showed a spring collection chamber beneath the northern ridge. From there, gravity-fed lines supplied Arthur's workshop, the old farms, and the basin where Silver Pines later constructed its artificial lake. A red circle marked the primary control point. Ridge valve. Hannah traced the line with one finger. It's still inside the Caldwell legal description. The recorded water rights deed confirmed it. Arthur's father had granted neighboring households limited access to water for domestic and agricultural use. The agreement allowed service connections, but it never transferred ownership of the springs, pipes, reservoirs, or control valves. No sale. No abandonment clause. No authority to resell the water for profit. Bellamy Utility Management had been collecting fees from infrastructure it did not own. A second folder contained inspection logs written in Arthur's blocky handwriting. The entries continued until 9 years earlier. Then the tone changed. Unauthorized excavation near Eastern Branch. Pressure diversion toward new development. Developer refused access. One note had been underlined 3 times. Silver Pines drawing from main line without recorded agreement. My throat tightened. Arthur had discovered the theft before his stroke. He had been trying to document it. Rachel Monroe arrived with survey equipment just after sunrise. She compared the utility maps with the original property description and satellite elevation data. The system makes sense, she said. The lake sits below the spring head. They're using your gravity pressure. Can we prove it without shutting anything off? She nodded. We trace the line, test flow at the ridge valve, and inspect the junctions. No interruption needed. That mattered. Cynthia had spent days telling residents I wanted dry faucets. I wanted the opposite. I wanted every tap running when the truth came out. The final document was not in Arthur's handwriting. It was a printed email chain between Douglas Keene and Cynthia, dated 8 years earlier. Douglas warned that Title Review had not confirmed ownership of the Caldwell water network. Cynthia replied 4 minutes later. Once the subdivision depends on Caldwell water, no heir will risk shutting it down. A second message followed. Pour over the old access points. Remove markings wherever possible. I read the words slowly. The workshop flood. The missing county maps. The concrete over the pipe. None of it had been panic. It had been policy. Henna photographed every page, uploaded copies to secure storage, and sealed the originals in waterproof evidence bags. Then she called the county prosecutor. Rachel marked the ridge valve location on a modern survey. It sat beneath a landscaped overlook less than 50 yards from Silver Pines Lake. By noon, we had a plan. We would not touch the valve. We would request a safety inspection, notify the title insurers, and place survey markers around the access chamber. If Cynthia left them alone, the inspection would prove ownership. If she tried to bury them, the cameras would prove intent. I looked at Arthur's old ledger, its pages warped from years underground but still readable. Cynthia believed power came from controlling what people feared losing. Arthur had understood something better. Power came from knowing where the truth flowed. And now I knew exactly where to find it. We marked the ridge valve at 2:17 that afternoon. Rachel drove 3 orange survey rods into the ground around the stone access chamber while I mounted 2 battery cameras in the trees above it. One faced the valve. The other watched the service road leading up from Silver Pines. The air smelled like pine needles and cold iron. Below us, the artificial lake reflected a clear blue sky. Children rode bicycles along the shoreline. A maintenance cart moved between flower beds near the clubhouse. Everything looked peaceful. That was the danger. Cynthia had spent 9 years making theft look like landscaping. Hannah sent the first preservation notice at 3 p.m. It ordered Silver Pines, Bellamy Utility Management, and Douglas Keene to preserve all records, equipment, access points, and physical evidence connected to the Caldwell water network. A second notice went to the county inspector. A third went to the title insurers covering every home in the development. By sunset, the inspection was scheduled for Tuesday morning. Cynthia received electronic service at 4:26. At 4:41, her SUV appeared on the ridge road. She stepped out wearing dark glasses and walked around the survey rods without touching them. Her face remained still, but the muscles in her jaw moved as she read the notice Rachel had sealed inside a clear plastic sleeve. I watched from the tree line. She called Douglas. Then she called the maintenance director. She never called an attorney. That told me she was not planning to challenge the evidence. She was planning to remove it. Martin attended the emergency board meeting that night with his phone recording inside his jacket. Cynthia told the residents the county inspection was an attempt to seize community infrastructure. She claimed our survey rods created a safety hazard and accused me of preparing to shut down water service during the investigation. One board member asked whether moving the markers would violate the preservation notice. Cynthia answered without hesitation. We are not moving evidence. We are completing emergency stabilization. Douglas spoke next. His voice sounded farther from the recorder. Cover the chamber before the inspector arrives. Once it's under concrete, they can't claim the valve is accessible or functional. A chair scraped against the floor. Martin asked whether the residents should be warned. Cynthia laughed softly. The residents don't need details. They need water. Hannah replayed that sentence 3 times in Arthur's workshop. Then she forwarded the recording to the prosecutor. We could have requested another emergency hearing. We didn't. The prosecutor wanted an overt act. The title insurers wanted proof that Cynthia knowingly interfered with physical evidence after receiving notice. Rachel wanted the valve exposed long enough to perform a pressure test, and I wanted every resident in Silver Pines to see that I had never threatened their water. So we waited. At 10:30 Monday night, a construction permit appeared on the HOA portal. Emergency Ridge Erosion Control. The work was scheduled for 5:45 Tuesday morning, 35 minutes before the county inspection. The plan called for a reinforced concrete cap over the exact location of the valve chamber. Cynthia had renamed destruction as stabilization. Again, Hannah obtained a court order authorizing the inspection and prohibiting any alteration of the chamber. The order was signed shortly after midnight. A process server was scheduled to deliver it at dawn. County inspectors would arrive behind him. Financial crimes detectives would execute a warrant covering the utility records and the workshop flood. The title insurers sent their own investigators. Nobody told Cynthia. At 5:31 Tuesday morning, I parked on the North Ridge with Arthur's brass key in my pocket. Fog covered the lake. The first concrete mixer climbed the service road, its headlights glowing through the white air. A second truck followed. Cynthia's SUV came last. She stepped out before the engine stopped and pointed toward the orange rods. "Pull those first," she said. The maintenance crew removed them one by one. Then workers dragged plywood forms around the stone chamber. The mixer extended its steel chute. Wet concrete churned inside the drum. I checked the camera feeds. Both were recording. Below us, lights began turning on inside 71 homes. Coffee makers, showers, kitchen faucets, all drawing water through the system Cynthia was preparing to bury. At 5:52, the chute lowered over the ridge valve. Cynthia raised her hand. I heard Arthur's voice as clearly as if he were standing beside me. "Everything downstream depends on what happens up here." The driver waited for her signal. Cynthia looked toward the lake, certain no one was watching. Then her hand dropped. Concrete began sliding toward the chamber. The first wave of concrete hit the plywood form with a thick, grinding rush. Cynthia kept her hand lowered. The mixer driver opened the flow wider. Gray cement rolled toward the stone chamber, swallowing the orange paint Rachel had sprayed around the ridge valve. The smell of wet limestone and diesel filled the fog. Then blue lights appeared below the ridge. Cynthia turned. Two sheriff's vehicles climbed the service road, followed by a county inspection truck and a dark sedan carrying the title investigators. The concrete chute kept pouring. A process server stepped from the lead vehicle before it had fully stopped. "Cynthia Bellamy?" She moved toward him, already reaching for her phone. "You're interfering with emergency stabilization." He handed her a sealed order. "You are being served with an injunction prohibiting alteration of this site." The county inspector ran past her and slapped the emergency shutoff on the mixer. The drum continued turning, but the flow stopped. Concrete hung from the chute in a heavy gray rope, less than 4 feet from the valve chamber. Cynthia looked at me across the worksite. "You planned this." I stepped out from the trees. "No, I documented it." A detective removed the maintenance director's radio and asked the crew to step away from the forms. Another deputy photographed the missing survey rods, the concrete trucks, and the preservation notice Cynthia had torn from its sleeve. Hannah arrived with Rachel 2 minutes later. Rachel climbed into the unfinished form and cleared wet cement from the edge of the stone lid with a shovel. The brass lock was still visible. I handed her Arthur's key. Cynthia pushed toward us. "You cannot touch that system. 71 families depend on it." The inspector blocked her path. "That is exactly why we are inspecting it." Residents had started gathering along the ridge road. Some wore bathrobes beneath winter coats. Others held coffee cups and phones. The man whose daughter had a medical condition stood near the front. His expression was not angry now. It was afraid. I looked at him. No one is losing water today. Rachel unlocked the chamber. The stone lid lifted with a deep scrape, releasing air that smelled of iron and underground springs. Inside, the valve wheel sat exactly where Arthur's map said it would. C.W.C. was cast into the housing. The inspector lowered a pressure gauge into the chamber while Rachel opened a narrow testing bypass. No faucet stopped. No alarm sounded. Water continued moving beneath our feet. A blue tracer approved for utility testing entered the Caldwell line. 6 minutes later, color appeared in the clear inspection port beside the clubhouse. Then it reached the lake inlet. A murmur moved through the residence. The pipe was connected. The system was mine. Rachel adjusted the bypass again, redirecting part of the lake inflow into an old drainage channel for less than 2 minutes. The water line dropped only a few inches. It was enough. Along the muddy northern bank, a row of square limestone posts emerged from beneath the surface. Each carried the same carved letter. C. Caldwell Boundary Monuments. Silver Pines had built its lake over them. Cynthia stared down at the exposed stones. Douglas Keene arrived as detectives were opening the clubhouse office under a search warrant. He stopped beside his car, saw the cameras, and tried to leave. A deputy closed the gate behind him. The title investigators carried boxes from Bellamy Utility Management. Bank records, service contracts, handwritten payment ledgers. Martin's recording played from Hannah's phone. Once it's under concrete, they can't claim the valve is accessible or functional. Cynthia's own voice followed. The residents don't need details. They need water. Nobody shouted after that. The silence did more damage than anger could. By 7:10, all new Silver Pines property transactions had been placed on administrative hold. The county suspended Bellamy Utility Management's operating approval. The prosecutors secured the workshop records and the hidden engineering maps. The residents still had running water. Cynthia no longer had control of it. The concrete in the truck began hardening before she found anything else to say. She had brought 2 mixers to bury the truth before sunrise. Instead, she had gathered the inspectors, witnesses, cameras, and evidence around the exact valve that proved everything. Arthur had warned me that everything downstream depended on what happened at the ridge. That morning, Silver Pines learned he had never been talking only about water. The final settlement was signed 14 months later. By then, the ridge had changed. The plywood forms were gone. The concrete trucks were gone. The warning signs had been replaced by a locked steel cover over the valve chamber and a small county plaque identifying the Caldwell Water Cooperative System as protected infrastructure. Silver Pines still had running water. That mattered more to me than winning quickly. The investigation proved Cynthia had used Bellamy Utility Management to collect more than $800,000 in unauthorized fees. Douglas Keene had relied on a defective deed, concealed the Caldwell water agreements from lenders, and used falsified infrastructure documents to secure development financing. Arthur's land had never been properly transferred. Neither had the springs. Neither had the pipelines. The judge confirmed the Caldwell estate owned the disputed acreage, the ridge valve, the main water lines, and the basin beneath the artificial lake. When the ruling was read, no one celebrated. 71 families sat behind me in the courtroom, waiting to learn whether the truth would cost them their homes. Cynthia had built her entire defense around that fear. She had told them I wanted revenge. She had told them I would close the valve. She had told them I cared more about land than people. Hannah stood beside me while the court reviewed our proposed agreement. The residents would keep their houses. The title insurers would compensate the Caldwell estate for the developed land. Douglas's frozen assets would cover part of the loss. The remaining claims would be paid through a supervised settlement fund. Every homeowner would receive a clean title. The water system would transfer into a resident-owned cooperative with independent audits, published rates, elected oversight, and no private company hidden behind the HOA. I retained ownership of the springs and ridge infrastructure, but granted the cooperative a permanent, regulated service agreement. No arbitrary shutoffs. No secret surcharges. No one person controlling the valve. Cynthia lost her real estate license before the hearing ended. She later pleaded guilty to fraud, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy to falsify utility records. Douglas went to trial. His attorneys called the development a misunderstanding. The jury called it theft. Silver Pines dissolved its old HOA 3 weeks later. Martin Hale became part of the temporary resident board. The man in the red work jacket apologized to me outside the courthouse. His daughter stood beside him holding a paper cup of hot chocolate. "I thought you were going to take everything," he said. "So did Cynthia." He looked down. I should have asked more questions. I looked toward his daughter. "You were protecting your family." That was the difference between him and Cynthia. Fear had controlled him for a week. Greed had controlled her for 9 years. The stone workshop took another summer to restore. We rebuilt the walls using the original fieldstone. The hidden chamber remained beneath the floor, but the records were moved into a climate-controlled archive at the County Historical Center. Arthur's maintenance ledger went into a glass case. So did the brass key. I kept the original note. The ridge was never conveyed. Find the ridge valve before they bury it. The artificial lake remained. The clubhouse became a community center. The remaining undeveloped acreage entered a conservation trust that protected the springs, forest, and limestone ridge from future construction. On the first anniversary of the ruling, I walked to the valve chamber before sunrise. Fog floated over the lake. Porch lights glowed inside silver pines. Somewhere below, water moved through iron lines Arthur had maintained with his own hands. The system sounded exactly as I remembered. A low hum, steady pressure, truth moving quietly beneath the ground. I rested my hand on the steel cover. Cynthia believed power meant controlling the board, the gate, and the water bill. She was wrong. Power was knowing where the real valve was. Justice was having every reason to turn it, and choosing not to. The families kept their homes. The water kept flowing. And no one ever buried the ridge valve again.